Alright, hello everyone. We are back for another Golf Clash tutorial video here. And what I wanted to do here for you guys is put together a tutorial. This is going to be kind of an intro tutorial, kind of describing the process to you guys of what the next new style of videos coming to my channel is going to be. So here you can see a hole. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start drawing on the screen and kind of going over how to play the hole no matter what the wind is. And I'm going to just kind of give you this introduction video so you can actually see all the pieces that I'm going to be putting, and I'm going to describe what they are. And hopefully, you can use this as your basic intro tutorial so you actually know what those items are when you go to the rest of my videos. So that way, it's going to allow me to get through the other videos much quicker than this first one. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, I'll get that screenshot and we'll go to the image here. And I'm going to be putting club priorities up here in the top corner. So for instance, the minimum sniper that I expect to be able to use on this hole, it's more distance related than anything, is a sniper 5. And next you'll see I'm going to do guardian here. You can get away with very early guardians. You really won't need much. Maybe guardian 1 may be just a little bit early. Let's take a look here real quick at the sheet. Maybe guardian 2. You need very little top spin on this hole. So, making sure that you have that could be favorable. Additionally, let's go to, for instance, the hammerhead here. So for hammerhead, same thing applies. All you really need is that very early top spin is the only thing that, and you always have that on this club. The only thing, and you always have a very good distance on this hole as well. It already starts out more than a sniper 5 does, even as soon as you unlock it. I also want to note to you guys that these are also listed in order of priority as well. So I would recommend, first that you'll be able to have your number 1 priority as sniper, and then guardian, and then hammerhead, and then cataclysm. And these are pretty much the only ones that I'm going to talk about because they're the only ones that you should be thinking about later in the game. And next thing that I'll also be doing is I'll be highlighting, the tee box that we're playing. So this is going to be from the second tee box. And you're going to be able to find this hole in, I believe this one's in Tour 8. This should be a Tour 8 video. So, additionally to this, to just showing you guys that we'll be talking about the Tour 8 here, we're going to put this wind arrow that is basically going to cover all directions. So for instance, if I'm looking at this bottom one right here, this is a tailwind, this is a headwind pointed directly down towards 6 o'clock, for instance. So just think of a clock head, and it'll pretty much describe what the wind is when you're looking at this. And additionally to this, I'm going to be talking about the adjustments that I'll be using. So another thing that I'm going to be doing is I'll be putting out to the side. For instance, for a side wind, I may use for this hole max plus 20%. And that's pretty much universal that I'm always going to use that adjustment on this hole. There's pretty much no exceptions. Additionally, on these, you'll probably see where I'll put in how much spin that I use. So all these adjustments are going to have top spin. So, you know, all these adjustments that I'm going to write here are going to be top spin related. So for here, I might only use a quarter bar. And for here, I'll just use, you know, I'll probably just use 0. Then down here, I may up the amount that I use just slightly. So you do need to kind of stay below 1. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe 0.8 here to 1.0 on this bottom one. Once you get up towards 1, you stop being able to stop it. So you do need to, you know, have some kind of control. Additionally to this, let me show the ball guide. You know, I try to land very aggressive towards this front half. What that allows you to do when you land very close to the edge is that second hop that you get. This one, it ends up always clearing the rough. And you'll see that guys from time to time, they'll clip that rough. So that'll be a mistake that guys make for this hole. So let's talk about you know, the tailwind case. And for the tailwind case, I pretty much used the same as the side spin on this, or the side wind case. So I'll use pretty much max plus 20% in this case as well. For the headwind, it's a little bit different because we pull more towards max over the water, much farther. You need to add for this adjustment. So I might use max 30 to 40% depending on how large the wind is. So for instance, if my wind's a 5, maybe I'll use max plus 30. If my wind is a 10, I'll probably use closer to max plus 40, for instance. And what that means is, let me go in here to the notebook app. If I was going to, let me just switch to Sniper real quick. And if I had an 8.2 wind, for example, maybe I'll use max plus 30. Maybe even max plus 35, for instance. It really, and you'll see, so instead of going the 8.2 rings, I'm going to adjust 11.3 for a headwind. Now, if we're talking the side wind, I'm going to go about 10 rings. 10.1. I'm going to use this max distance number so you can see on the screen that it says max, and that's how my adjustments look on the picture. So in addition to this, the only thing that I really need to talk about that I haven't discussed yet is this green grid here. So let me grab a pen, and we'll use a color that we haven't used yet, maybe this green. As long as it's, no, that's green's going to be a bad one. So let's get a little bit more, maybe here. So it just kind of fluoresces a little bit. So each one of these little grids that I kind of, so let me blow these up here. And this is going to be 1 square yard. Did I make this pen larger? Yep. So each one of these sides is going to be 1 yard. So these little green grids here, each direction you go, whether it's north or south, north and south, or east and west on the green grids, from corner to corner, it's going to be 1 yard. And that's going to make each green grid 1 square yard. So the only other thing you need to do is worry about wind effect. So for instance, let me give you an example here. Let's talk a little bit about wind effect. I'm not going to do the wind effect discussion in the videos because it's just going to eat up too much time. But if you use this one tutorial and just kind of see it for the very first time. So let's say, for instance, that my wind is a tailwind pointed at about 130. So let me maybe more accurately do that. And let's say that it's 7.4 miles per hour. So we'll put this wind in here. So the only other thing that I'll need to do is I'll kind of need to shift this, my startup point a little bit. So instead of starting towards this X, I'm going to basically shift my aim point over down this way to account for that. Now, how much, there's no set procedure on how much you need to correct. The problem lies, and this is one of the main reasons that I try to stay away from mentioning it to you guys, is towards max club and towards min club are completely different amounts that you need to go. So, for instance, towards max club, there's much longer time in the air. The wind affects it more. So you need to adjust more. Well, you can see in this adjustment, we're going to be doing max plus 20. So it's a very large adjustment. So maybe I'll use, for instance, 2 green grids, for example, for the 7.4 miles per hour, which roughly equates to 1 per every 3.5 to 4 miles per hour. However, towards min club, this is more, this technique that I'm kind of talking about, it's not super important that you take off to consider wind effect, but what it's going to help you do for this hole, since there's the water, you can see how there's water very close to your first and second bounce. So there's not much wiggle room that you can do. So what I'll usually do for this one is I'll still try to set up to land very, very north, because I can't really play with that adjustment. I can't pull back, or else my second bounce might hit the rough. So what you'll usually see is I'll just shift on this hole just straight sideways and try to still get that length down to where it lands the same length. So, for instance, if I was going to usually pull back in this direction 2 grids, maybe only one of those grids, for example, is in the left direction, and one of them is in the down direction. So that would kind of be, how you would adjust more or less 2 grids. So if you were just to shift it just straight over, and the only reason that we're going to kind of change the way that we usually make the adjustment is because of, that second and first bounce being influenced by the rough, for instance. Otherwise, I would always pull back in the opposite direction. So let me just kind of, draw, just so you understand, towards this, an arrow pointing the other way. For this, I'd go maybe, say, 2 grids in this direction. However, in a case like this, where you have the influence of the potential pulling back and landing and hitting that second bounce in the rough, you might want to just back away from doing that in this particular case. But you still need to create some kind of offset, because once the wind plays, it's going to deflect towards the right a little bit. So if you don't adjust and start so this original lineup here needs to be wherever the pin is. You might want to start about 1 green grid in this situation towards the left-hand side of the hole, but just keep this distance in place. So still make sure that you are very close to the edge here. I'd say between 1 to 2 rings from the edge. In the tailwind case, it's going to be nice, because what that does is it's going to expand your ball guide out. So this distance between bounce 1 and bounce 2 right here, it's going to be increasing from what you see on your ball guide. So that's a very nice thing in a tailwind. However, in the headwind, the opposite's going to happen. That's going to compress down, for instance, and it's going to be a little bit smaller. So you'll have to add just a little, and that's where kind of adding this top spin, changing it to almost, 0.8 or to 1 mile per hour is going to come in handy, because that little bit of extra top spin specifically is going to help create the difference between that gap and make that gap much more closer to what it usually plays on the side wind case. So here you can see, everything that's in place for this discussion here. And this is pretty much all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. for the hole. You'll see, I just wanted you to familiarize yourself so I don't have to keep going over those same symbols. But this little added on part in the left-hand side, I'm probably going to leave off for the most part, but I did want to at least, put together just one tutorial here where we could talk about the green grids and how much to, the way that you always are going to kind of offset your ball guide is going to be opposite of the direction of whatever the wind is. So if I have a left pointed wind, for instance, this case pointed at 9 o'clock, I'm going to offset my ball guide straight to the right of the hole. And if it was 10 miles per hour, maybe I go 3 grids before even starting my adjustment. I align, say, 3 of these little grids towards the right-hand side to account for that wind effect. It's something that you always have to do. It's much more prevalent in the par 4, par 5 than it is in the shootouts, because, as I mentioned, you don't always have the luxury, landing zone wise, to do that. You can see if I was to do that here, what I usually do it here is I usually do it with side spin. So for instance, because I can't really change this, if I start moving this target line over here, I'm going to start to bring the bunker and rough into play. So what I'll usually do is I'll use side spin instead. So maybe I'll add on like 2 or 3 right spin and just deflect that ball guide off towards the right of the hole, towards those green grids that I'm mentioning. And then I'll let the ball still land here. And then once it lands here, it's going to go much more truer, like you actually see on the ball guide. So there's kind of 2 ways to offset. You can either do it with the adjustment, or you can do it with the side spin. And whichever you choose, it's pretty much equivalent. Like usually I'll use like 1 green grid for 1 side spin, for example. It's very, very close. So in this case, if I was going to move 2 grids, the thing that I can do is I could just, kind of offset it with my side spin instead. But as I mentioned, you just do want to be careful in this situation, because bounces 1 and 2 are a little bit too close to the rough. You kind of need to keep them locked in place. So, side spin could be a good thing for making that adjustment. If I was to use the side spin, a little bit of left spin, offset my ball guide, maybe 1 grid in this case, towards the left-hand side, and then go through that adjustment, I would probably wind up with a very good result for this hole. So hopefully you find this instructional video helpful. And I'm going to be putting together all of these for all, I'm going to try to do all of the Tour 7 on par 3s today. But this is going to be kind of your starting placeholder for you to basically just see all the things that I'm going to be putting in place. And then you'll know the way that all of these are going to flow going forward. So hopefully this will, help your game and be a good starting point for you to learn from. And then after going from this tutorial, you can go to watch some live shots and actually see these things being applied in game. So good luck. Let me know how it goes, and see you guys on the next one. Take care.